Oh, oh, friend. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Quackcast. This is the Drunk Duck Quackcast, Quackcast number 424. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Chance. Hi, Chance.
Hello.
There's Pitface. Hi, Pit.
Hello.
And Baines. Hi, Baines.
Hello.
Oh my God, it's all the same hellos.
Yeah.
We should do it in
Sorry,
chorus.
also my cat said hello, so I'm really sorry about that.
Yeah, I thought you said she only spoke Greek, so now we have a multilingual cat.
Yeah.
It's excellent.
Yes, he said it in Greek probably. Greek meows. This is Greek meow.
Oh, they say like a cat, like the animal sounds in different languages all have like they're sort of spoken different ways. What's meow in Greek?
Meow.
Was that meow or meow?
Meow.
Oh, meow. Oh, how cute. I don't know what it is in any other language. All right, let's do this. So, in this Quackcast, we're going to talk about the creative divide between consumers and creatives and how to bridge it, or at least according to my little thesis that I came up with today. So, before we get into that, I'll have to bring up the featured comic that Quackcast featured this week. Oh my goodness, the art in this one's very lovely. It's called Void, the Guide to a Healthy Relationship. Interesting title.
Very.
Very, very long. So take it away, Kwai, with Void, the Guide to a Healthy Relationship.
Hello, this is Quackcast, and the feature I've selected for this week is Void, the Guide to a Healthy Relationship by Danny Boy, and it is rated M for mature. When Apollo was very young, he had a friend named Julian who had an unfortunate overdose on sleeping medication. Now, a few years later, he is working at a bar and comes home to wild nights of partying, acid trips, and drinking sprees. This comic embraces the darker side of life and shows a realistic portrayal of people with addictions. The art is showcased on full pages of color that has the texture that looks like it was colored using colored pencils. All fonts are hand-lettered. In the more recent pages, the updates contain cameos of characters from other comics, and they're listed in detail on those pages. Figure out how to navigate a social life in the clutches of substance abuse and read Void, the Guide to a Healthy Relationship by Danny Boy, rated M.
And that was our feature. Thank you very much for that, Kwai. Void, the Guide to a Healthy Relationship. There we are. I managed to say it in not a monotone this time. So, Gunwallace has given us a theme, a musical theme this week. The musical theme is to the comic Super Temps, which is a comic that was featured a long time ago by me, and it's quite lovely. I don't know, maybe about 5 years ago or something, long time ago. It's a good comic by a good guy. Sounding a lot like someone drumming on the open tops of a lot of PVC piping, this is a slow creeping beat that builds and layers, a real construction zone, stacking that scaffolding higher and higher into the dark sky, lit up by bright, piercing arc lamps that star, blur, and streak through the dark skeleton of the unfolding structure. So, take it away, Gunwallace, with Super Temps. And that was the featured music, Super Temps. Thank you very much for that, Gumwallis. Okay, now into the topic of the Quackcast. So we're talking about the bridge between consumers and creatives. So the reason I came to this idea, I talked about this in our video. If you pay $5 and up, you can see our Patreon video and get a look at us actually talking about it. So to recap, the other day I was on a Facebook group, and there was it's a Facebook group about comic creators, and one of them was talking about how to promote his comic, and he does a sci-fi comic, and he's sort of bemoaning the fact that he really can't find any traction on Reddit, because Reddit's mainly focused on consumers rather than creatives. And especially because he does a sci-fi comic and he wanted to promote his comic on the sci-fi portion of Reddit, the subreddit. And it's really super frowned on that you promote anything of your own there. And he was sort of bemoaning the fact that they're all consumers and they're interested in weird and unusual sci-fi, and that's what he does. And why can't he do that? It would make sense. And it got me thinking that, there are thousands and thousands of, not thousands, there are hundreds of millions, there are billions of consumers. Everybody is a consumer. And there's a lot less creators. And these consumers they voraciously, they just want anything. They need constant stimulation. They need something all the time. And us as creatives, you'd think that, we'd be swimming in viewers for our work. We really should be, but we aren't. There aren't that many people who really want to jump on us for our art. And why is this? Why is there a bridge between creators and consumers? Why can't we get the consumers to feast on what we're providing? And I was thinking, really in terms of this sci-fi section, well, the fact is that these people are interested in sci-fi. They're interested in things that have a bit of cultural resonance. Even stuff that's obviously modern stuff has to have a lot of cultural resonance, has to have a lot of cultural traction in order to get published in the first place, because it has to mean a lot to a lot of people. So, that's part of the qualifications you need to become a widely published or, bought screenplay or whatever. And even older stuff that's sort of picked out that's slightly weird or whatever, that also has a wide cultural resonance because it has the cultural history behind it. So even if only 50 people saw it back in 1932, whenever it was done, it's gained cultural traction and cultural resonance because it's part of their history now. So we look back at that, and it's got all this kind of stuff that is, part of our shared cultural history. So that's what it got me thinking. That in order to have your work be selling to people, well, not selling, but interesting to a greater amount of people, it has to have a greater cultural resonance, because people are human beings are a species that are like a herd species, a pack species, like a colony of chimpanzees, a herd of wildebeest, whatever. We are naturally evolved to live in a group, and we take cultural cues from each other, and we're heavily dependent on communication, which is heavily dependent on shared symbols and things like that. We share, we copy, all that kind of stuff. And what sort of raises us above the level of other animals is the fact that we have a continuing culture that we build on, we add to through our communication techniques, writing, visual communication, oral, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so this also sort of plays into the things that we create, in that things that have more cultural resonance, things that have more universal traits about them, are more easily understandable to more people, and they become they get shared more. They're interesting to more people because the more universal they are. So us as independent creators, should really take that approach. And I'm not saying you should turn all your stuff into super mainstream, McDonald's level kind of stuff, copying X-Men or copying the Avengers. That's not what you should do. What I'm saying is you should create things that have some universal themes. Obviously, love, death, sex, fear, these kind of things. Patriotism, religion. If we're going on that kind of level, it's a slightly higher level of universality. If we're going on those kind of things, those are universal. They have resonance for a greater amount of people. And you can create work that maybe you're not sort of focusing on that universality, but if you do have some universality in your work and you sell those universal traits, you tell people about your work in terms of those universal traits, then you'll tap into the thing that makes it more interesting to people or more understanding to a greater amount of people than if you just talk about your fantastic individual character who has, super strength and can see through women's clothing or whatever. I don't know, your superpowers you choose. But if you try and sell it in the more universal aspects, this person's suffering from, is it they're in love, they're suffering from loss, in those kind of aspects, then it's a lot easier to make it more understandable, more interesting to a greater amount of people. Anyway, so that's my blurb about it. I'll sort of throw it open to you guys. It's not a very original idea. I just want to say that. I'm not sort of pretending, wow, I've discovered the secret. This is pretty general stuff. So anyway, what do you guys think?
Well, I think that there's probably an audience for that guy with the X-ray clothing vision.
It's a new comic, Bottomless Waitress 2.
It's kind of universal, actually. Not universal. I mean, kind of. That's not going to be every audience that wants that. But
it's going to work. Yeah. Well, if you deliberately try and make your work totally universal, obviously that's going to fail. So you don't want to do that either.
Yeah, that's what you were saying as you were setting it up. See-through waitress. Transparent waitress. It's the next evolution. See-through, like floating around and stuff.
Cellophane waitress.
Yeah.
You crazy, Chance.
But yeah, if you try to make it completely universal and you send off all of the interesting parts, all the edges, it's just going to be nothing. It's more likely to appeal to no one,
Yeah.
It will be probably generic if you do that.
Exactly. You don't want to go for the McDonald's approach. That's always a huge failing. And I really came up with this idea because us as amateur creators, creators of webcomics, we are not creating our stuff to sell to, Hollywood as a screenplay or turn into independent films even, or, Marvel or whatever. Our stuff is very individual. It's done for ourselves and our small audiences, and we're pretty happy with that. But we all do want bigger audiences. I think that's a given for most of us. We'd love our stuff to have more traction. So we do need to think about this in a way at least. And yeah, giving ourselves an ability to have a slightly broader audience is good. So we should really think about the universal aspects of our work in terms of that universality, rather than just in terms of what would people like. I think that's where we fall down.
Yeah. I think also there is a bit of a culture of being frowned upon if you actually try to market your comic. This is what we're talking about. How you package and present your comic to audiences. So there has been this general approach of like the indie creator shouldn't try to market the comic, like just leave the comic there and word of mouth and and some kind of magical allure is going to draw in the audiences if you are good enough. If you don't have this, you are not good enough. And if you market it, you are even worse than that. So there is this sort of thing, or at least I remember until very recently there was this thing going on, which is absolutely wrong and baseless, because people are not going to know your comic is there if you don't present it. It's just that different audiences, like you catch the eye of different audiences with different beacons, so to speak. So just try to look at your subject matter or your art or elements of your webcomic to see what different people would like in it, not necessarily what you would like in your comic. And then you have a chance of making assorted campaigns, as I said also in the video portion of the cast, and you can appeal to different people with different campaigns, with different pieces of your comic. I hope that didn't sound like the fruit, like my accent. So,
no, that's good. Although
Okay.
I would say it's not so much about what you think people would like, more about what you think would resonate. That's what I'm thinking with script.
Yes, definitely.
Because well, it's there's nothing wrong with sort of thinking that what people would like, but you tend to project on people too much then, and you think, oh, this person, what would they? Yeah, maybe they're into this, maybe, and then it becomes you putting your likes onto them in some way, rather than sort of thinking more universal.
To phrase it differently, like you are right. To phrase it differently, you would you want to promote the strong suits of your comic, whatever it is that is really powerful and is it really pops in your comic.
Yeah, that pops.
For example, if everyone is talking about the power of friendship, but the only friendship that you have in your comic is like between two third-tier characters, and they don't get much screen time, and it's not really important that they are friends or they have. I don't say that you explore the power of friendship because you don't in your comic. Just because you have this particular small little morsel of friendship in your comic doesn't mean that you can promote it as that, because people will come looking for it and then they will not find it and they will be frustrated and they will take away and never return.
Yeah, and possibly give you a really bad reputation the way certain films have had from incorrect marketing. So, yeah, don't do that. That's a real surefire way of failing. That's why a lot of films have become cult films, because they were often fantastic films. They marketed themselves the wrong way and they failed, and then they picked up a second audience decades later on small screenings or video, because people rediscovered it without the marketing hype, without being tainted by that, and liked it for actually what it was, and that's why they became cults. Yeah, so
yes, definitely that is the reason why the cult following and the new appreciation happens. And that also is a little bit of someone discovers it, and that someone is part of a group, like an audience, I mean, that likes this sort of thing and passes it around, and that's how they gain the traction at a later date. That takes a lot of time to happen.
Yeah, you can't rely on your comic doing that.
even decades later.
I've depended on that for years for Pinky TA to get her second win, but it still hasn't worked. So it's don't rely on the cult following. Speaking of universal appeal, Pitt has been showing us her Maui, her cat, and if we had that on video, that would like sell the Quackcast to everybody. That would be massively appealing. Perhaps we should have that in the next video. We should just have Maui on Pitt's end and Demos on your end.
Yes.
And
yes,
finally,
like maybe we should have, instead of us talking, we should just have our cats in this little window that we have over here, and we do a voiceover as the cats, do their antics. This is going to bring people in.
exactly, and Baines can have his little bunny.
Exactly.
Yes.
And finally, we'll get the audience that we needed for the Quackcast. So, what are the kind of universal themes that you guys sort of really find appealing? And well, perhaps we all find all the universal things appealing, depending on what they're in, I suppose. I mean, I wouldn't have normally thought of myself as someone who likes romance romance things and love romance movies and stuff like that. But yeah, they can be really fantastic. I quite like them. So even I'm not really a fan of horror or those kind of films, but some of them are really compelling and fantastic too. So I think pretty much all universal themes can appeal to all of us.
Yeah, I think that's
what I mean by definition, right? If they're universal themes,
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, sorry, I didn't have anything else. I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that if you present any kind of theme well enough, even people that don't necessarily are fans of the particular idea or the genre or whatever, they will at least appreciate it, even if it's not like their super favorite enough. So yeah,
and it also goes back, not just say simple universal themes, those really basic ones, love, hate, death, fear, that kind of stuff, and the more sort of complicated ones like justice or patriotism, that kind of thing. Those are also universal themes. Relatability, that's part of universal themes. Especially in comedy, something like Seinfeld, they used to say, oh, that was a comedy about nothing, but it was a comedy about characters and being very human in the way they react to things, because comedies before Seinfeld are very, very stylized and everyone was very happy or, obviously very much characters. So it's like even Married with Children, which was not a happy sitcom. It was a very stylized, heavily stylized sitcom with characters being very cartoonish. And Seinfeld came along and the characters were a lot more human in the way they reacted, even though they reacted in quite some of them were cartoonish, like Kramer, but and a lot of the things they did were very bad, but they were bad in a very normal human way. And it was sort of just our human reactions to the weirdness and the stupidity of life. That was what that thing was, and that was why it was appealing, because they were so relatable. So yeah, universality can be in terms of the sitcom kind of thing, like your typical Strange. You deal with that, don't you, Baines? Characters who have.
Well, thank you. I try to, and I sort of thought in terms of like the animal inside people. Like they all have their different emotional states and their different temperaments and stuff, but they all, desire their territory, and they're looking for these very basic human things that people look for. And an original idea behind that comic was what people say versus what they actually want. I thought that was like so often different. People are deny so much everything. On Seinfeld, it's interesting that like when people talk about it now, like the executives were like didn't know how to market that show initially before it caught on and became so huge. They were kind of like, this is too. I remember them like reports or like retrospectives now of them originally saying like, this is too Jewish, it's too New York, quote unquote. Yeah, like they literally, this is such a particular take on life, like it's not going to have massive appeal or broad appeal. But underneath those specifics of being like these New York single, some Jewish characters or a Jewish, quote unquote, Jewish sensibility was this universal humanity. It wasn't perceived that way because it was kind of like expressing it differently, and the culture will move forward, and there will be other new things that express universal themes differently, you know, like things will move ahead, and it's the people who don't seem to fit in at first who possibly will be the best stuff, you know, most like innovative and kind of defining kind of stuff going forward.
Now that you mention that, I think that is a very crippling misconception that a lot of at least mainstream promotion tactics have. Like, for example, if you have an all-black cast, the white people won't be interested. Or if you have an all-Jewish culture / comedy show, non-Jewish people won't be interested, and so on and so forth. And that is very, very wrong, because in reality, people are not focusing on, oh my God, these are all black people, and I don't know, like I'm not interested in them because they are black. That's not how people think, and that's not how people choose what to consume. And they will be looking at the situations. They will be looking at the problems or the characters or the adventure and things like this. And then they will just enjoy whatever it is that you are showing them. And I think generally it's like they're trying to compartmentalize, like we're going to make so and so whatever qualifier product for this particular audience and nobody else.
Right.
And that's not how people think, and that's not what people enjoy in general.
I will say that it does help to have a character you can identify with. You know, that is a kind of, that does make things a bit more interesting.
But the character that you will identify with doesn't necessarily need to have all your demographics.
No, it doesn't. But it does help that there are, say if we're talking about, like, you know, the problem of back in the old days when all the characters were white, so to speak. You know, that obviously you'd identify with the main protagonist or whatever, or say all the main characters are often, like, you know, male, and it does really make things a lot more personal if you can have a character that sort of fits you more than the other ones. I'm not saying you have to, but it does sort of help. And I'm definitely not saying you should have all the characters are looking and think exactly like you, and that's the only way you can relate to them. No, that is as you say, you do not have to have that at all. That's
the thing is, and that's the whole concept that people should keep in mind, is that people will identify, oddly enough. Like, for example, you might have all black cast with a token white guy luring the white audiences, and which is a stupid thing to do, in my opinion, unless the whole idea is the plot revolves around white dude with all the black dudes and whatever that means. But if that's not your core issue that you are exploring, then you might find that the white audiences will not identify with the white guy necessarily, but they might identify with another black person that has elements that are far more relatable. Like, for example, he is the character that runs the social commentary and echoes the thoughts that the audience will normally have. So they might tend to identify with him much more. Now, for example, the guy that is the more obvious, quote unquote, choice of what they would identify with. And the point I'm trying to make is that the relatability is what you're looking for in a character, not the character's outer shell and what they're going to be, what they're going to look like.
Yeah.
Or where, the social rank that they might have or whatever. What they are going to be looking for is things that they understand because they have common experiences that they can converge and translate in terms of emotion, and then you have engagement. So that's why I really feel that the whole marketing thing of let's match the common the things that are alike and stuff that is like looking in the mirror is a very wrong way to go.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Excellent point, yeah, because we have things like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, that Family Matters, those kinds of things. Those were universal. Those were global hits. Those things in all countries all over the place, from China to Australia. So yeah, people didn't have a problem hating Stephen Urkel in any language.
He was the Jar Jar Binks of Elmira.
Yes. Then I knew that.
Oh my god!
It's hard to believe the good policeman from Die Hard was the poor old suffering. That's his everyday life. In special occasions, every Christmas he has to deal with Bruce Willis in the Nakamura building, and then he goes back home for the rest of the year to the Winslow household. Deal with Steve Urkel. He'd rather be dealing with Hans Gruber, I'm sure. Wouldn't we all? Oh, jeez. Yeah, so very good point, Tance, about superficial aspects. Superficial aspects, like skin color, race, culture, ethnicity. Those can be you can choose those to be your relatable points, because when I say universal themes, I don't mean everything has to be massively high level appealing. You could just be wanting to appeal to a specific broad demographic of people, and you can appeal to them on that range, but that is very limited. If you're only doing it with ethnicity and skin color, that will only take you a very, very small part. So it's hard to type and talk at the same time.
I mean, you also can look at Pixar, which I don't know if those are worldwide hits. I think they are, but Pixar for their 20 years, their 20-year heyday or whatever, very serious story development and groups of writers who would go hard on these stories and making them really work. And their main characters are toys or fish or bugs or robots. The movie Up, about a 90-year-old man, or Wall-E, about a robot alone on Earth. These are these are specifics that most of us don't fit in that box.
No.
But it's a universal story on a deeper level. It's what people what these characters want and things that are in their way and what they struggle with is you feel it. And that's kind of the universality, whether there's...
Exactly. A very good point of things that have been, marketed on a universal level, but also created around, universal ideas. And that really does work. It really does interest everyone. And you look at a Pixar movie, and they are broad appeal, they are mainstream thing, but they are not just pap. They're enjoyable. They really are genuinely, fun and enjoyable. You don't look at them and think, oh, this is Teletubbies, or this is, this is...
I'm thinking about movies like Coco, for example, because now you mentioned Pixar, where you have it's a non-white cast and everything, and the culture, the whole premise of the culture is something that is potentially alien or known to vast audiences that are not Mexican. So, but still, it's an incredibly relatable movie, and it really reaches into your heart. And then you also take in the extra cultural information as well. So the whole idea, I think, that generally when we make webcomics and we market our art is to look for what is universal in the sense that what people would relate regardless of who they are and what they have been brought up with in terms of culture, and go from there in how you pitch your comic. And then you are going to get a wider range, potentially a wider range of audiences than the niche audience that could, come in for the very specific thing that they are looking for, regardless of plot or character.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, in the end, we're not just talking about creating at a creator level. We're talking about, as you say, Tance, a marketing level as well. And so you don't have to go back and re-edit your comic and do a total change and think, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. You just have to, look for those themes, look for those, and talk about your comic in terms of them.
If you pander to the audience, if you try to just squeeze in and conform into the things that you think or you feel or for whatever reason, if you have had research or something that people like, then you get probably something like Aragon, which is a fantasy work that I personally hate because it is like a Frankenstein's monster or bits and pieces of things that are popular in other fantasy series or work are popular for different reasons, and it's just a patchwork of things that really gets under my skin. I really don't like it. Which is a personal opinion. Okay, if you like Aragon, just knock yourself out. I generally don't like it for that reason, and it's like you can see that the person writing it was connecting dots and taking off boxes. So
yeah. Yes, it's always a mistake to go, and it's the problem with that kind of thing is you're skipping the point, you're skipping the levels, you're not going for the universality. And you're just copying what someone else did with their idea of, universality or appeal. You're looking at something, oh, wow, this thing, was really appealing. Harry Potter, that's really popular these days. So I'm going to set my thing in a magical school. And
yeah, that's completely different than trying to find the humanity or the universality in what you want to do. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's not to say that Rowling's, Rowling, she did something that was terribly original. Her works is very derivative. But the trick is, for Harry Potter, instead of cherry picking a lot of other fantasy for the tropes, she cherry picked it for the broadly appealing things. Kids learning, kids in a story. Fighting against an evil power, those kind of things that have that kind of that kind of universal appeal. That's what she, picked out from all these things, and people who don't fit in, misfits, all that kind of stuff. She took from Roald Dahl and all sorts of other people, and obviously C.S. Lewis, things like that, and pulled those together and created something that had, universal broad appeal. So that's what you got to do when you're cherry picking. You're not stealing specific things; you're stealing the themes that work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we should do. It's like Shakespeare is still popular today, not because people like speaking in terrible like Renaissance English. It's because they have universal themes that apply even today very much. Hamlet's famous speech, to be or not to be. He's talking about committing suicide there. He's talking about life and death. So there we are. Those kind of universal themes work. And anyway, I think we're over time now, possibly. So thank you guys very much for being on the theme cast, or the Creative Divide cast.
Grazie.
And yeah, we will talk to you next week on Quackcast number 425.
Yes.
See you then.
And don't advertise on Reddit.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah, get someone else to do
Bye-bye.
that for you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.